SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling it, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you've made it happen, is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para abrir el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The Hub on the Transfer and Commercialization of Technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the Hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
Porque es importante que estemos juntos en esto, porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocios, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector.
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo lo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras se aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children and they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno, y lo dieron todo lo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children. And they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
We will be starting in 6 seconds. Thank you.
Muy buenos días, soy Gastón Schulmeister.
Good morning, everyone. I am Gaston, Director of the Department Against Organized Crime of the OAS. I would like to welcome you to this conversation called Combat Against Illegal Gun Trafficking and Firearms, and we will be talking about different financial tools for its investigation. Before we begin, I would like to inform you that this event is being broadcasted live via Zoom and also via OAS, social media, Facebook, and YouTube. And for those of you who are joining us via Zoom, we have simultaneous interpreting services, English and Spanish. So you can select the language and preference right down to your right on the icon of the world. So
In Spanish, you can select the language of your choice at the bottom of the screen on the globe icon. Si tienen cualquier inconveniente con el audio, la
If
interpretación,
you have any inconveniences with the audio, please write us via chat, and our support team will offer the right support. And also some participants in particular, I will request to please keep your mics off in order not to intervene in any presentation. If you would like to participate once the presentations are over, according to our agenda, please request the opportunity to speak via the mic or raising your hand via Zoom. We are very appreciative of your interest in the follow-up of these themes. Having said this, I am very pleased to start by welcoming the national international panel members that are joining us today, along with specialists and representatives of the OAS state members, which experiences and knowledges are key for the development of this conversation. In particular, I would like to welcome the permanent representative in Mexico before the OAS, Ambassador Luz Elena Baños. She's joining us on April 5th, and this is the anniversary of the Inter-American Day to Counter, Arrest, Manufacture, and Illegal Firearms Trafficking. The present conversation it will be one of a series of events developed surrounding this anniversary by Mexico as a pro tempore secretary of the Inter-American Association Against Illegal Firearms Trafficking, trafficking as well as of munitions, explosives, and other materials related. And this is part of the support that the department has offered. The OAS Security Department has offered. As we know, the Americas is one of the most affected regions by armed violence in the world, and illegal firearms trafficking is not only affect public safety, but it also interrelates and it feeds back organized crime in its different modes. In this context, today we are aiming to promote a conversation between government, specialists, and civil society surrounding illegal trafficking in firearms, the analysis of their links with other illegal markets, and the identification of financial tools applicable to an effective approach by means of investigation. I would like to thank and recognize the government of Mexico for their commitment, exercising their role as a pro tempore secretary, and for their main acting by generating social awareness in this topic. Without any further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Ambassador Luz Elena Baños, permanent representative from Mexico before the OAS, for the official opening of this event. So, Madam Ambassador, you have the floor. It's all yours, please. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is a joy to welcome you to the second public conversation on the effects of illicit trafficking in firearms that Mexico organizes. The president of the conferences of the state members and the pro tempore secretary of the Inter-American Convention against illicit trafficking in firearms, munitions, explosives, and other materials related that we all know, in collaboration with the Ministry of Security at the OAS. We have invited you to this conversation as a celebration of the anniversary against illicit trafficking in firearms, established in 2018. The Mexico's proposal during the ordinary period of the General Assembly of the OAS. Illicit trafficking in firearms, it has devastating results in our society. All of the countries in this hemisphere knows the horrible consequences of illegal trade of firearms and every material related that day-to-day affects our citizens and increase violence in our society. In the exercise of its leadership, Mexico has set two particular goals. the universalization and its implementation. We haven't been able yet to reach universalization of this convention during the annual assemblies and during the 5 conferences of the CITA 6 members. And the last one happened in October 2021. We do have 3 state members active participation. We trust that these states will continue exploring paths to be able to ratify this at long and short term, since this is a convention that's pioneer in the topic. For many years, Mexico has aimed to open the conversation and start the conversation with government experts, with the private sector, and the organized civil society to discuss the challenges of this convention, the challenges faced in order to fully be implemented. Organized crime, transnational ones, evolve and adapt their strategies continuously. So it is quite pertinent for our authorities to share challenges and perspectives continuously. These fora are quite necessary and they have proven against and against their usefulness. COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to repropose and redirect our efforts. We have also seen challenges that we had never seen before, and we have had to adapt to them. And it has also opened many doors that we hadn't explored before. So this year we decided to start liaison activities that via social media that invites society in general and everyone that can understand the phenomenon of the illicit trafficking in firearms. Some weeks ago, in the framework of the International Women's Day, we gathered in this session in order to discuss illicit trafficking in firearms and how it affects public security and women, in order to face and to understand the situation in which we are today, and to hear and welcome proposals to minimize the deterioration of the social tissue as a result of this problem. And if possible, then in the differentiated impact that armed violence has in women and in children as a threat on their human rights, as well as against their integrity and their personal security, and of course, their right to life. If you hadn't been able to join us, then I invite you to visit that conversation that's available in OAS social media. In today's conversation, we will address the links of illicit trafficking in firearms with other crimes that it interrelates to. Illicit trafficking in firearms cannot be understood, least faced, if we do not understand its relationship with drug dealing, asset laundering, terrorism, with organized crime in general. We have invited experts, first-level experts that know about these topics from the different places where they work. We have the Vice Ministry for Planning Strategy of the Ministry of Defense in Colombia, Jairo Guerrero, and Executive Secretary of Latin American Response, Esteban Juli, the co-director of the Labs in the Air, and the multidimensional coordinator of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Tenorio, and from the OAS, we have the specialist of the Department Against Organized Crime, John Graham. It is also an honor to welcome the president of the Hemispheric Security Commission, Ambassador Anthony Spencer. I would like to thank the distinguished panelists that are joining us today, and particularly the Department Against Transnational Organized Crime of the OAS, which Director Gaston Schutzmeister moderate throughout this session. Thank you for your presence. I'm sure that this will be a successful conversation. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador, for your welcoming remarks. After this official opening, we will proceed with our conversation entitled Fighting Illicit Trafficking in Arms and Links with Other Illegal Markets, Financial Tools for its Investigation. And for this, we have today, just as he was introduced in the official opening, we have a very distinguished panelists by members that will provide different perspectives and responsibilities from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico and the Action Financial Group, FILAT, the Ministry of Defense in Colombia, the Control Arms Organization, and our Department Against Transnational Organized Crimes at the OAS, known as the DOT. So in order to start with our conversation, I would like to introduce today's methodology. Each panelist will have 10 minutes to start their presentations that will be about specific topics such as regulatory obstacles, institutional obstacles in terms of investigation and prosecution of illicit trafficking in arms and related crimes, typologies of asset laundries associated to illicit trafficking in firearms, and techniques of financial investigations available to fight them, and measurements to be able to legally prosecute illicit trafficking in firearms, and also the role of the private sector and the civil society in the fight against illicit trafficking in firearms. Once these presentations are done, we will have a conversation. We will have a Q&A session followed by brief final remarks by each of the panelists. Afterwards, I will close today's session with the final remarks as well. So I respectfully ask our panelists to help me adhering to the agenda in order to ensure this methodology. As a moderator, I will assist you in any reminder of the time you have available and left. And participants, I remind you and ask you to please send and share your questions via chat or via YouTube or Facebook. In order to begin with our presentations, I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Isaac Morales Tenorio, Coordinator for Multidimensional Security in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. So, Mr. Coordinator Morales, you have the floor. The floor is all yours. Thank you so much, Gaston. Good morning from Mexico City. Good day, Madam Ambassador, representative of Mexico before the OAS, distinguished panelists, members, and audience. It is an honor to participate on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in this conversation, especially, and as Ambassador Baños was saying, in this day that reminds us the relevance of preventing and counter-arresting illicit trafficking in firearms in the entire hemisphere. I think that it has been clear as of the work that at the Inter-American Convention we've been doing, CIFTA, and the recent conversations that with the support of Organized Crime Department and the Public Security Department have been organized. We see the priority that this challenge is posing in our region. It is clear that the Latin American continent has been particularly affected by illicit trafficking in firearms in multiple aspects, of course. Not only as an illegal crime, but also with the consequences that it generates. It is also clear in recent reflections that have been carried out at CIFTA, the existence, undeniable existence, of links, and we could even say growing links between illicit trafficking in firearms and illegal financial flows. It is important to remind ourselves that in the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we have identified within Goal 16 of this agenda a goal that addresses reducing, eliminating completely illicit firearms flow
Esta
as well as
coyuntura que nos presenta además
And this relationship is explained in how these two elements, both firearms and illegal financial flow, have significantly increased the power of criminal organizations. The power of these also to expand their criminal arms towards other criminal activities. Hence, these organizations and the consequences that it generates have been unfortunately translated into greater violence and deaths throughout the continent. So the multidimensional reflection that's required for this topic should start as of the identification of trafficking in firearms that has been wrongly considered as a less visible crime. Yes, it is true that the hemisphere countries, well, it is common to even address possession or illicit use of firearms as an aggravative or of other crime linked with drugs or trafficking persons or organized crime even. However, not as the core aspect to be investigated and counter-arrested. I think that we are at a time where it is necessary to take the attention on the importance of centering efforts against trafficking in firearms and firearm possession, not as a side aspect, but as a main aspect against organized crime and the efforts to reduce violence in our region. For a Mexican government, it is important to elaborate, and this has been done as of different times in the multilateral fields, both in OAS and the UN, to strengthen the focus of illicit markets, to address this problem from the illicit markets focus or criminal markets focus. The link between illicit trafficking in firearms as facilitator or as an element empowering those that commit other crimes could be explained as of this group of different criminal activities. An important element that has to be taken into account and that from CIFTA has invited states to consider, particularly in the recommendations that in 2021 were done during the 5th conference of state members of CIFTA. Among these recommendations, the need to consider a humane dimension on this problem was recommended. Behind each gun, each firearm is ammunition, illicit one. There is not only a crime to be investigated, to be prosecuted, to be sanctioned. There are also lives. There are persons that see their possibilities of development affected and that see all of their possibilities hindered, and there are people dying. This human dimension has to be understood and considered in order to further understand the range of damages that this phenomenon causes. So from work centered in people to consider different international cooperation options to be able to face this problem. An additional aspect that I would like to share for today's discussion and to address the different dimensions that enable the links of illicit firearms market with other and trade with other crimes is addressing the entire life cycle of a firearm. This is important to not only consider a crime being committed or the trafficking in this case, but also manufacturing, but also trade, and all the way to the final destination and storage even of these materials, firearms and ammunition. Only by considering the entire cycle of firearms will we be able to dimension the different consequences that it generates throughout this entire cycle. And at the same time, we will identify the responsibilities that not only states and governments have in order to prevent and counter-arrest this phenomenon. If even people and civil society and manufacturers and the industries related to firearms have to be taken into account too. Also, with this collaboration of illicit markets, human dimensions, and the entire life cycle of firearms, the need to get a better coordination and collaboration and cooperation in national levels, as well as regional international levels, will be achieved. Mexico's government has, from different multilateral spaces, divided cooperation and synergy creation among the different fora, instruments, and mechanisms oriented to prevent the deter of firearm trade or illicit trafficking in firearms. It is necessary to see the entire picture, not only a part of it, so we can better address this challenge. And here we incorporate one last element that I would like to share with you for further discussion. Work from other fields linked with organized crime, with different criminal expressions that are further linked against the efforts against illegal trafficking in firearms. Let me stress on two. Recently, the Group of International Financial Action carried out an internal exercise, a quite significant one, important one, to dimension that both financial flows related to firearms caused by deviating illicit trafficking fed the elements linked to money laundering and even to financing firearms or arms for use in terrorism activities. So this showed the importance that this has not only in this hemisphere, but in the general world. So that's why it is so important to trace financial flows linked to illicit trafficking in firearms. The second effort, quite significant, that we have taken into account in our work in this hemisphere is the recent adoption by the UN Drug Use Association, I mean the body that's in charge of drugs policies creation, a resolution that's strengthening the international cooperation to address, prevent, and counter-arrest the links between illicit trafficking in drugs and illicit trafficking in arms. This resolution proposed by Mexico and adopted last month in March of this same year manifests for the international community from the different communities, the link that we have between these two types of crimes, and how when addressing all of the efforts against drugs, against the illegal drug trade or drug trafficking, it is important to consider the efforts against illicit trafficking in firearms. In the case of the American continent, and in particular Mexico, these links are evident and they have generated victims and greater violence. Hence, it is urgent for the Mexican government and particularly for the efforts that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs carried out on international level to counter-arrest and counteract them. Under this comprehensive effort of synergies and collaboration, it is key in order to find better responses, more comprehensive responses, to work together, but also to find concrete and focused and centralized responses. And illicit trafficking in firearms is also related to the rest of illicit markets. and trades, and we have to remember that. Last but not least, I would like to remind you of the importance of the declaration of the fourth conference of the state members of the CIFTA, of the Inter-American Convention, where it caught our attention and not only the importance of counter-arresting the illicit trafficking in firearms, but also readdress the conversation on ammunition. We tend to reduce this effort to firearms. However, it is also important to consider the recent behavior of this criminal market in order to realize how the concrete increase of illicit trafficking in ammunition also turns into a priority to be readdressed, considered already by CIFTA, however, necessary to be able to take into account. It is important to take them into account in our own efforts. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share these ideas, and I will remain here for any question that you may have or comment. Thank you so much, Gaston, for the opportunity. Thank you so much, Mr. Morales, for your presentation, discussing the fundamental or the main role that governments and different regional mechanisms and international mechanisms had in combating illicit trafficking in firearms, as well as for stressing the high relationship that illicit trafficking in firearms and the organized crime in its different expressions, including particularly, as you very well mentioned, the importance of addressing illicit financial flows. So now we will continue with Mr. Esteban Fulling's presentation, Executive Secretary of Financial Action Group in Latin America, GAFILAT. Mr. Secretary Fulling, the floor is all yours. Please go ahead. Thank you so much, Gaston, and thank you so much to OAS and to the Mexican government for the invitation. My presentation is on the same line as the one that Coordinator Morales just shared. I agree with many of the comments that he just shared with you. And my presentation, let me start by sharing my screen, will be related to illicit trafficking and asset laundering. And basically, that's what we work the most at CAFILAT to fight this problem. And when you see the general situation of Latin America in terms of illicit trafficking in firearms, one of the main things that everyone has considered as one of the main regional threat is asset laundering. Everyone recognizes the amazing amount of money that illicit trafficking in firearms generate in their country. They know it is a threat, and it is also an essential and complement of organized crime that's quite linked to organized actions and how they are empowered, as it was mentioned before me. But it is not really a crime separated by professionals trafficking in firearms that are only dedicated in doing so in an extra-regional or extra-territorial way, but they link it to a crime that's concretely related to organized crime that could exist in a country or in a region. But I would like to stress on the fact that all of the countries in terms of asset laundering have to do with munitions as an important crime, as a generator of illicit money. When you check what the capability that adding up these two illicit actions bring, you realize that legally countries, so for this graphic can be reproduced regionally. This shows 200 countries' compliance in terms of our legislation. And we see that the creation of FIU that could track cash coming from illicit trafficking in firearms exists. There is also responsibility to carry out a financial analysis, and there's also a possibility to carry out investigation of this type of crimes. There are also possibilities to apply laws in terms of prosecution. We also have in asset laundry included the crimes related to illicit trafficking in firearms, and there are also responsibilities by certain police departments and prosecutors and judges in the legal prosecution of these crimes. And of course, we also include all of the measures against the seizures if we see these crimes. So the legal aspects from money laundering, we see that it is covered in most of the countries. Now, when we discuss effectiveness, and this has to do with asset laundering specifically, considering illicit trafficking in firearms as well as others that generate illicit earnings in the region, we see a clear deficiency. With the management of the FIU, only 4 countries out of 12 have approved this aspect in terms of legal prosecution right on asset laundering as a crime that sets precedents. We have one. We have most of them, which is related to asset laundering legal processing, but we also have a number that's low in terms of the fight against this crime. And this offers aspects a little bit more concerning in terms of the response of investigation departments in these criminal activities in the region. So if we compare with what this information is meaning globally, we see that above the media, countries can generate a good financial intelligence, however it fails when it comes to investigation of and the prosecution thereafter. And when we specifically consider its link with illicit trafficking in firearms, well, the results are low compared to other crimes. So it is relating illicit trafficking in firearms is not as linked as it should be to illicit asset laundering. So generally, they are linked to organized crime. However, there is a debt in terms of linking this financial investigation and addressing the illicit financial flows that are linked to this type of activities. And it goes back to other precedents, corruption, illegal mining. It is still illicit trafficking in firearms is still in low numbers, as you can see here. And there is a star here. This is Colombia's case. They're showing big numbers, large numbers. However, it has to do with illicit firearms positioning, and it is to know what type of traffic it is specifically and what type of crimes are related, if it is possession, if it is trafficking itself, of illicit firearms. And we see that numbers, at least in the results, once again, are not quite positive. So out of all the investigations of laundry, from 0 to 4% of the investigations, which would be like 3% more or less, considered that the turning crime was the illegal trafficking in firearms. And if we go discuss sentences, only from 1 to 5%, or even 10%, had as a turning crime the illicit trafficking in firearms. So, when the asset laundry is related to trafficking firearms, we see that this is still a debt. It is still not enough being done in terms of regional efforts. We need to better focus to investigate the financial activities linked to an illicit trafficking in firearms. And this has to be done by the states as a response to this threat. If you see the typologies, at least the typologies that are informed by countries, every 2 years we do typologies. However, every so other years we do compilations, and these are the links for you. In 2019-2020 typologies, it was specifically a term specifically related to typology related to COVID, to some typologies that include trafficking in firearms, but relate specifically to drug dealing. So in this case, we see some trafficking, but it goes back to trafficking in drugs and trafficking in firearms. And after this, 2020 apologies, we also see a margin transition
y delito de tráfico ilegal
related to asset laundering and the illicit trafficking in firearms and ammunitions. So this, of course, is not proposing a very good over terms of its relationship. Definitely, there are cases of illicit trafficking in firearms, and it is a crime that generates illicit proceedings, including linking it with asset laundering. And as I just mentioned, we need to include this in the risk assessment efforts and in the threat assessment efforts that we do at AFILAT regionally with information of the entire groups. However, we are only directly linked to an organized crime aspect. There is a legal system that enables its investigation and prosecution. However, we are not seeing the expected results yet in financial investigations related to laundry assets. The cases that are investigated in general, we have the laundry via an investigation that could come to a seizure or to sentences. But I think that at least the results show that we still need this quality leap, if you must, and to be able to link it to asset laundry and to illicit money movement generated by this crime. Hence, we also agree that it is important to continue with training, focusing on raising awareness of the specific activity and the ways to research it and more clearly to link it with source of illicit money and with asset laundering. This is all I wanted to share with you. I tried to adhere to my 10 minutes and be able to do it as fast as possible. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much, Esteban, for your presentation. Quite a great representation of how important it is to have financial investigations in the fight against illicit trafficking in firearms and the role that they can play and the role that specialized organized crime organizations in charge of studying organized crime have in carrying out diagnostics that could help us, as you shared, in terms of the risks. So now, I would like to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Jairo Garcia Guerrero, Vice Minister of Defense for the Strategy and Planning at the Ministry of Defense in Colombia. Mr. Vice Minister, good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone that's joining today. And I would like to thank all of the participants and the members and the government of Mexico for inviting us. I think this is a strategic aspect in terms of guaranteeing safety, security of our citizens. I would like to start by saying and talking about the effect that the use of firearms have in an illegal context. In Colombia's case, nearly 78% of crimes happen in a firearms environment, which is quite significant. And I would like to start by discussing the commitment of Duque's president in everything having to do with control and technological capabilities related to investigations, in terms of financial and legal actions that can be found, but also the political message in terms of having a development plan that we have, for example, in the Colombian case, and the government plan that we have with very clear instruments related to two topics. Of course, to having a better control of the legal market of firearms. And we have had great effort in terms of having better tools that allow, first of all, to send a message to citizens, where the Colombian state, the military in Colombia, and the police department in Colombia have the monopoly of the use of firearms. And since 3 years ago, we've had a decree that restricts firearms possession and carrying, except with a specific situation, so we can send also that message of control. But we have also been working with our control, firearms control and trade commission, as the previous panelist mentioned. It's fundamental for us to have not only firearm control, but also ammunition control, in some cases also explosives, that are still a risk in many cases. And in this sense, we have worked strongly to strengthen our instruments. First, we have been using a software so that we can provide traceability of all of the requests of those special permits that are handed in today only in very specific cases. And the second one is the case of the ballistic footprint. This system allows to have a footprint that allows us to identify firearms, but also the trace that it leaves behind. So with this, we can have a strengthened control system that allows to send a message to that gray market where firearms are bought legally, however, they end up being used by other players. So the Colombian government, the Colombian state, has been working in close relationship in order to strengthen those follow-up control monitoring capabilities, so we can have the warranty that all firearms and munition that could be acquired does not end up in illegal organized crime activities. And something that Esteban mentioned that's quite important is that our unit has also been working tirelessly in a complex situation, which is the framework of our, which is our legal framework. And this allows us to move forward. It is not a huge volume of cases, the one that we have. However, having these source cases where prosecutors, as well as judges, as well as judicial investigators, can start increasing their experience in addressing them. So I think that it is very important for us to be able to also move forward in those investigations, transnational investigations, because it has already been mentioned. Illicit trafficking in firearms is related to the use by criminal organization, drug dealing, displacement, forced displacement. So these are quite negative aspects in some territories. So in this sense, we have to find what we have also been using and needing from other divisions. In order to identify these firearms, I must add that we have found a huge volume of cases. Actually, it is the highest percentage related to our control. We have around 18,000 to 21,000 firearms that we have been able to seize a year. And also, short firearms are one of the ones that we have been able to intercept. And in this sense, I think that ammunition becomes fundamental. And this is one of the things that as a state we have been strengthening here. We also have a military industry, and we are also generating better delimiting capabilities, increasing the number of ammunitions that could be marked per block, improving the type of marking, which is a laser one that can be detected, that can provide traceability. And I think that this should be a regional commitment, because that's what the effect is about, being able to have investigations that from its origin can determine how this firearm market is behaving, as well as the ammunition market. We, in the Colombian case, given the geographic characteristics, we have made a great effort to have a sea control, land control, air control, because our borders are quite heterogeneous. So in this sense, we have also focused on generating this tight control, which I find fundamental to be able to have better results. We, of course, every time that we have important arrests in these organized crime activities, we include illicit trafficking in firearms possession, which also strengthens a legal case and provides better results with control efforts. We understand very well how these flows have been acting, both ammunitions and firearms. We know how it behaves in the Latin American continent, how it is related to the Middle East, to Europe. But in this sense, I think definitely the OAS is doing a great job to put on the table these great challenges that each of the countries are facing. And I would insist in these two scenarios that we have been working on. First, developing better capabilities for these crimes investigation in particular. Second, strengthening the capabilities in order to provide firearms, ammunitions, and even explosives traceability. And of course, third but not least, to be able to have effective results in these firearms control, so that we can in some way reduce the impact in each of those crimes that I have mentioned before. I think that these are the topics that I wanted to share with you, Gaston, very quickly, so that we can have always the availability later on to further discuss these topics. Thank you so much, Gaston. Thank you so much, Vice Minister, for this presentation about the efforts that the Colombian government has been doing in this subject, and to share your valuable experiences on the complex and multidimensional problem that illicit trafficking in firearms causes, including control mechanisms for the illicit market that expand to ammunitions and explosives, and that also compromise the technological offerings for its monitoring. Now I would like to pass the floor to our next panelist, Cindy Epps, co-director in Control Arms Organization based in the US. So Ms. Epps, please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schulmeister. Let me just make a quick adjustment on my translation. Thank you. On behalf of the Control Arms Coalition, I'd like to thank the government of Mexico as the Secretariat Pro Tempore of the CIFTA, the OAS Department of the OAS Department of Public Security, and the OAS Department of Transnational Organized Crime for the invitation to participate in this panel. My presentation today, I've been asked to present some examples of how civil society can support government action to combat and prevent illicit arms trafficking. So that will be the focus of my presentation today. Control Arms is the global civil society movement that seeks to reduce human suffering by stopping irresponsible arms transfers. One moment. Thank you for putting the slide up. Appreciate it. Control Arms is the global civil society movement that seeks to reduce human suffering by stopping irresponsible arms transfers that fuel conflict and armed violence. Slide 3, please. In achieving our mission, with the support from our 150 civil society members, we aim to universalize and effectively implement the Arms Trade Treaty, advance accountability in the global arms trade by encouraging good practice and calling attention to irresponsible arms transfers, and to amplify the voices of civil society in the arms control dialogue. Slide 4, please. The illicit manufacturing, trafficking, and diversion of conventional arms are major threats to human security and development. These practices fuel armed violence, organized crime, and terrorist activities, which in turn facilitate increased levels of human rights violations, hamper development, and exacerbate poverty. These problems are particularly evident in Latin America and the Caribbean. The region, next slide, please, thank you. The region, though accounting for only 8.37% of the world's population, has the highest homicide rate in the world. More than a third of the world's homicides occur in the Latin American and the Caribbean region, and over 60% of these are committed with firearms. Africa is the only other region with a homicide rate exceeding the global average, and the two regions stand in stark contrast to the percentages of homicides committed with firearms in Asia and Europe, which account for only 22% and 4.7% respectively. Chief among the factors contributing to the armed violence epidemic is the illicit trafficking and diversion of small arms and light weapons in Latin America and the Caribbean. The United States is a major source of illicit arms and ammunition for this region, with 40 to 60% of weapons seized in Central America and the Caribbean being traced back to the United States. Smuggling between countries and diversion of arms to the illegal market due to ineffective national stockpile security, theft, corruption, and unauthorized sales by private security companies have also contributed to the growing number of arms on the illicit market. With active involvement in international and regional instruments and in the adoption of strict national firearms legislation, weapons and ammunition marking systems, and delivery verification exercises, Latin American and Caribbean governments are working together with civil society to address the illicit trafficking and diversion of arms. A key partner to governments, civil society organizations have a vibrant and long-standing presence in the Latin American and Caribbean region and play critical roles in pushing for action to combat and prevent illicit arms trafficking. Their clear and consistent commitment demonstrated through advocacy campaigns, research and monitoring, and capacity building programs that provide technical support and encourage policy dialogue contributes substantially to the achievement of strong national legislation and effective implementation of regional and international arms control instruments designed to combat illicit trafficking. And now I'll take time to illustrate some examples of civil society contributions in these areas. Next slide, please. First, we'll discuss advocacy. Control Arms actively engages in advocacy at the ATT Conferences States Parties and other relevant international and regional meetings. We do so in order to highlight synergies across sectors and support states in improving and strengthening the regulation of the global trade in conventional arms at the international level. In 2021, Control Arms also addressed the CIFTA Conference of the States Parties and the UN Security Council during its open debate on the impact of diversion and trafficking of arms on peace and security, organized by the Permanent Mission of Mexico. In both of these fora, Control Arms highlighted the role of the Arms Trade Treaty in preventing the illicit trade and diversion of conventional weapons, including small arms and light weapons. This type of sustained engagement by civil society in meetings and debates not only provides independent input and a diverse range of perspectives, it ensures monitoring and accountability of progress made toward the implementation of international and regional arms control instruments. At the national level, Control Arms members organize meetings and workshops to encourage action to combat illicit arms trafficking. In these meetings, we encourage the adoption of new laws or the amendment of existing legislation, provide support towards the establishment of national commissions on firearms, and present research that identifies practical solutions to the issue of illicit trafficking. For example, in Mexico, the Center for Ecumenical Studies, along with other civil society organizations, including the Mexican Commission for the Defense and Promotion of Human Rights, Global Thought MX, and 24-0 Mexico, participates in a dedicated working group on firearms of the Alianza por el Gobierno Abierto, pardon the pronunciation, to support the development of a strategy on transparency in the arms trade. Next slide, please. Civil society organizations also develop independent research and analysis to support states in their efforts to curtail the illicit trafficking of arms and ammunition, and provide substantive input and policy recommendations to regional and international bodies such as this one today. At the regional level, Control Arms members in Latin America provide influential reports that highlight troubling trends in armed violence and introduce practical recommendations to policymakers to reduce the harm caused by illicit firearms, particularly on vulnerable communities. For example, in 2022, Instituto Ciudad Paz in Brazil produced 3 reports relevant to the discussion at hand that cover armed violence, police violence, and the arms trade in Brazil, the connection between legal and illegal arms markets and its impact on diversion in Sao Paulo, and a profile on ammunition used in vulnerable communities in Rio de Janeiro. Civil society organizations also play a key role in holding governments accountable to their commitments through monitoring and assessment. Since the entry into force of the ATT 7 years ago, the Arms Trade Treaty Monitor, an independent project of Control Arms, has become the de facto international monitoring mechanism for the ATT and a key source of information on ATT implementation and compliance. The ATT Monitor report, published annually, creates greater transparency in the international arms trade by providing consistent and detailed analysis of reporting on international arms transfers. The Caribbean Coalition for Development and Reduction of Armed Violence, CDRAV, based in Trinidad and Tobago, is currently working to measure the effectiveness of recent amendments to national firearms legislation to ensure compliance with key international and regional instruments. It's this type of study that provides a necessary opportunity to assess the effectiveness of actions taken by governments and civil society in order to ensure their impact in the communities primarily affected by armed violence. To further accountability efforts, this year, Control Arms members lent support to the current legal action brought by the government of Mexico against United States gun manufacturers in the state of Massachusetts. The Center for Ecumenical Studies in Mexico and Asociación para Políticas Públicas in Argentina, along with other civil society experts, joined an amicus curiae brief submitted to the court containing information, data, and expert insight on the impact of gun violence on local communities. Next slide, please. Technical support from civil society organizations is critical to ensure that governments are able to develop and implement appropriate legislation to meet arms control commitments made on the regional and international levels. For example, with funding from the ATT Voluntary Trust Fund, Control Arms presently supports Namibia in its national assessment process to identify legal and practical gaps in the implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty and develop new legislation to fill these gaps. This partnership will allow Namibia to submit an updated initial report outlining its legal foundation for the implementation of the ATT. Control Arms members in Latin America are also active in providing technical support to governments in this area. For example, in Argentina, Asociación para Políticas Públicas was a fundamental partner in supporting the government's efforts to develop and implement the National Plan for the Voluntary Surrender of Firearms in 2006. Since the creation of this plan, more than 300,000 firearms have been destroyed in Argentina. As these examples indicate, assistance from CSOs, including the development of roadmaps and guidance manuals, gap analysis of legal instruments, and drafting of key legislation, serves to facilitate strong and consistent action on firearms and illicit trafficking. Taken together, these efforts can help overcome specific regional and national obstacles and accelerate the pace of domestic procedures that aim to reduce human suffering fueled by gun violence. Next slide, please. Control Arms and its members have also partnered with governments to support capacity building in the area of arms control in combating and preventing illicit arms transfers. Control Arms' ATT Academy program provides in-depth and tailored learning opportunities to governments and civil society to support their on-the-ground engagement with the ATT implementation. The ATT Academy also explores region-specific challenges related to security, human rights, and development. For example, in 2018, the ATT Academy in Latin America, which was hosted in partnership with Mexico, discussed the diversion of arms in the region and explored the links between gender-based violence and the arms trade. Control Arms members are also directly involved in government security sector reform efforts, including through capacity building and training of security personnel on stockpile management, arms marking, border security, and gender-based violence. Over the past 2 years, the Arias Foundation in Costa Rica has organized 31 seminars and workshops in 9 countries in the region for government stakeholders to encourage the exchange of information and good practices on arms control and to support the implementation of international and regional arms control instruments. These programs serve to strengthen and sustain the government's ability to overcome national and regional challenges posed by illicit arms trafficking. Next slide, please. The examples I've outlined today are intended to illustrate the varied, extensive, and critical role of civil society in the fight against illicit trafficking of arms and ammunition. Civil society organizations contribute to advancing the universalization and implementation of key disarmament and arms control instruments, to strengthening national legislation and policies to combat illicit trafficking, and to monitor the global arms trade and its impact on communities. As we consider the role of civil society, it is important to address the potential roles of all stakeholders involved in the global arms trade, including the private sector. While governments and civil society develop new initiatives to prevent and combat the illicit trafficking and diversion of arms, we must also work closely with the private sector to encourage routine information sharing on arms transfers during all phases of the transfer. This includes not only manufacturers, but also brokers, transporters, and freight forwarders. Finally, as we continue our work to combat the illicit trade in arms and ammunition, it is important to keep in mind our purpose. The human cost of unregulated and illicit transfers of small arms and light weapons in this region is simply too heavy. Too many here are impacted directly or feel the threat of armed violence every single day. As we discuss achievements and explore solutions to ongoing challenges, in addition to the number of weapons confiscated and destroyed, let us also ensure that our work has a meaningful impact on the communities, families, and individuals directly affected by the epidemic of armed violence and organized crime in the Americas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Epps, for your excellent presentation. Las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, digo...
Civil society organizations such as Control Arms are key societies in the efforts to address all of the aspects of illicit trafficking in firearms. Hence, we are very thankful for the valuable job that you do on this topic in order to identify effective strategies and the collaboration potential in fighting illicit trafficking in firearms, just as it has been presented. So, to continue, now I would like to pass the floor to the last panelist, Mr. Sean Grajales, Technical Specialist of the Department again. Oh, sorry. Please remember to mute your mics. Please remember to mute your mics. Someone was shouting. Please. So as I said, I was going to pass the floor to Mr. Sean Grajales, Technical Specialist of our Department Against Organized Crime, Transnational Organized Crime. My dear Sean, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much, Gaston. Good morning, everyone, and everyone that have spoken before me. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. So I am going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it properly. Well, I think that my intervention, I don't know, I guess it was accidental. However, I think that this is a very good opportunity to be able to link the conferences that we have heard before. So the specific topic that I will be sharing with you today is illicit trafficking in firearms and its relationship with other illicit markets. I think that Esteban already made some important introduction aspects for this presentation, and it is asset laundering and illicit trafficking in firearms. In a regional context specifically, we have a criminal convergence environment. Currently, this environment means that a criminal organization is not only dedicated to committing crimes, one crime in particular, but we see the divergence of different types of crimes in the same place at the same time, as well as seeing trafficking in drugs that are in charge of um, trafficking drugs to the north of the hemisphere. There are other trafficking in firearms organizations that have a diverse flow and that coincides when it comes to illicit money laundering. So these flows converge in different criminal activities related to trafficking firearms, to extortion, kidnapping, terrorism, trafficking of wildlife, trafficking in persons, illegal mining, counterfeiting, and smuggling. All of these illegal actions, as Esteban was saying, are an important flow of the illegal activities that go back and forth the illicit trafficking in firearms. So, evidently, we find that in the region there is a very close relationship between the illicit money and illicit trafficking in firearms. So in the analysis that we have carried out, we found new ways of illicit financial flows in which criminal organizations that have this convergence crime want to have a control of a territory. And this control is done from the financial perspective via investments. These investments are not only in real estate, for example, but also in productive activities and companies that are allowed to mix the legal money with the illegal money in order to facilitate this legal appearance. In other aspects, this same control of the territory brings them to find new ways of smuggling, and these are the paths where these financial tools are used for the criminal activities that we just mentioned before. So this territory control and this smuggling control allows for them to charge per operation to other criminal activities. So one criminal organization is not only aware of the crimes that they commit, but also of other crimes that are included in the list of crimes that end up in a passive income. And this money flow generates illegal financial flow that allows the capability to keep on performing criminal actions. So assets are related to the criminal organization to try to evade justice. So once we have this overview, of these new ways of illegal financial flows, we find some specific trends in illegal traffic that are related to these general organizations. The first trend is the leverage of illegal operations, the existing ones. And this is done using the smuggling of illegal activities using the same strategies. So for all sort of trafficking or smugglings, they use the existing strategies or paths that were already developed by other organized crime organizations. So that's how we see some techniques in common for drug smuggling from production centers to consumption centers are exactly the same ones used for transporting cash or for transporting firearms to the places where criminal organizations need them to be. The other part that we have found is a part that's quite concerning for us, and it's that the criminal organizations, show an analysis of risk-benefit. What is the benefit and what is the risk to commit the crime? What's going to be the sentence? And many times these criminal organizations after quantifying the benefits that they will receive when committing a crime, they find out that the sentences are not really representative or are not really as impacting their livelihood compared to the benefits that they would receive when committing said crimes. So this has brought us to identify two types related to asset laundering coming from the illicit activities of the criminal environment that we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. The first typologies that we identified are the ones based in cash. And these ones are related in turn with a reality that we see every day, and is that most of these illegal activities are developed in cash, and they take full advantage of economic activities based on cash that are developed in most of the countries where we are. The first type, of course, is transporter cash transportation as a mechanism to collect or transport assets or money coming from illicit criminal actions and try to place them in where the criminals need them. Second would be cash deposits via funnel accounts, and these are cash transactions, frequent ones in small accounts that afterwards are collected to larger accounts. And after a series of transactions, they have a legal structured appearance. The other aspect is the use of wire transfers by companies and then informal systems of money transfer. In the project that we are working on legally, we have identified some informal wire transfer systems, people that work on mining exploitation, illegal mining exploitation, towards the population centers where their families live. And once these criminal organizations use them, they can remotely pay or compensate the money, which is the product of illegal mining activities. The second group of types that we have identified are the types that are not based on cash and that require a larger level of structure. So the types that are related to asset laundering or money laundering via foreign trade, where techniques for covering or the amounts are covered also in their activities. And also, in terms of illegal mining, something that's concerning us a lot is to find an increase on the traffic of goods. For example, the case of gold. Gold, dust, gold or gold things or even gold junk. We have found in this type of operation that this type of assets that are of high value and that can be individually transported has been growing. And last but not least, the use of paper to cover up everything related to asset laundry via companies. I mean, the use of companies that simulate activities to appear money laundering to be legal. But what we are worried the most about, and that it relates to the presentation that Steven just shared, is asset laundering via professional networks. For us, it has been quite revealing reviewing some documents that have been issued particularly by CAFID and by some financial intelligence units that identifies criminal organizations, networks that launder money for several other criminal organizations. And they are not even aware of the type of illegal action they are doing, but they know that the money is illegal. However, they don't know what type of illegal activity had produced it. So they create illegal financial institutions, and they are compensated with commissions that vary depending on the amount of money that they launder or the time that they are given to do so. These networks use techniques for financial structures, complex ones, such as cover-ups or funnel accounts or money laundering via trade, and they can use the same structures to use assets of different clients. Of course, different clients that could be committing different type of crimes in different countries at the same time, in such a way that the largest these laundry networks are, then they will have larger amounts of money. And this allows them to involve a largest amount of instruments, as well as largest amount of countries that, of course, have different legislations. And this is and the structuring of these complex networks requires the knowledge in different abilities and skills. We need specific application softwares developments or the use of a certain type of software to structure all of these operations, and all of them are guided to hinder the work of the authorities in charge of their investigation, because of course 100% of them are directed to hide the illegal source or nature of the money that they are trying to move around. Via these networks, they modify their types in terms of the controls that are implemented by the authorities, and they are anticipated to the alerts that could be raised via accountants, lawyers, real estate, and brokers. In this case, it is not only one person or a group of persons, it is about an entire criminal organization that has the possibility of hiring advisors as they need them, as needed, depending on the type of mechanism that they are using for money laundering. This, of course, concerns us because this acts along with the low number of money laundering related to trafficking in firearms or the low operations related to trafficking in firearms. We at our department are convinced that one of the ways that we have to break down these organizations and this criminal environment that we currently have in our countries is from prosecuting illicit money and seize their assets or the wealth, which is at the end of the day the main goal that they have, the end goal that they have, and try to use these seized assets to try to remediate, to find remediation for the victims of these crimes. So I think from this perspective, in the region, we are still falling short in this sense. We have to promote the development of financial investigations simultaneous to trafficking in firearms and promote international cooperation. And with this conclusion, I conclude. Thank you so much, Gaston, and I'm here for any question that may arise. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sean, for your great presentation that allowed to elaborate on the relationship between firearms flow and illicit money flow and the relationship with our department and how we address the convergence with the actions of different criminal organizations and their activities. So we are almost out of time, but in order to continue with our agenda, I would like to open up for any question or comment. So if anyone wants to share a comment or a question, please do so. And then we'll have a second round with the panelists for final remarks. So the hand raised. Patricia Franjul from Dominican Republic's mission before the OAS. So I would like to pass the floor to her. Please go ahead. Thank you so much. I don't know if you can see me and hear me. Okay. First, before my question, I would like to say hello to the president of the hemisphere Mr. Anthony Philip Spencer. I would also like to thank the ambassador in Mexico for having this amazing initiative, Luz Elena Baños Rivas and her team, and all of the ambassadors here with us today, and Mr. Gaston also for being the moderator of this amazing meeting. In the case of Dominican Republic, there is a specific concern with the use of Bitcoin for these new transnational organized crime actions and the lack of regulation surrounding it. Recently, there was a success case that we would like to share that was called Discovery, where this group of people would steal identities, information, private accounts, and all of this was done via Bitcoin, and there is not that much regulation or information about it. So I wanted to know, I wanted to know if this concern is also one that you share, and what are the initiatives that you are thinking about them. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your question. And so first, I'd like to ask if there are any other questions to consider them for the Q&A session. Okay, are there any other questions? Well, if there aren't any further questions, if it's okay with you, I would like to start with the closing remarks of each of the panelists. So if anyone has to leave the session, please include your reflections on the chat. So without any further ado, I would like to continue with the same order of the presentations. So Mr. Isaac Morales Tenorio, please go ahead with your final remarks. Thank you so much, Gaston. And thank you so much for the question of our Dominican Republic colleague. There is a growing attention from the multilateral fora, I think that is important to mention it, on the links with emerging technologies and with the trade sale via internet of firearms, ammunitions, explosives, and all related material. So if we go over the recent documents, both the recommendations that the fifth conference of the state members of the OAS has collected last year in 2021, as we see here, the recommendations that are the result of the working group of the Convention Against Organized Crime in Vienna, we will find very specific texts that refer to the importance not only from governments, but also from international bodies themselves and other relevant stakeholders to address the growing problem posed by technological platforms, IT in general, and as a consequence, the growing use of the bitcoins in illegal market, illicit trade. Yes, it is true that they could offer an additional opportunity to invisibilize the illicit markets, which is important to address and stop. And I think there is also a growing trend from the UN, from the OAS, from other fora, specialized fora, like AFILAT, for example, recently, to this Bitcoin problem. So that would be my comment. So we can go over the multilateral foundation that this has created. Thank you so much for your intervention. So let me remind you that in order to close our session, now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Esteban Fulling to add his final remarks.
Considera oportuno, asimismo, hacer alguna devolución sobre la consulta que nos...
As well as maybe addressing the question by Dominican Republic. Esteban, please. Yes, definitely. Thank you, Gaston. And yes, I would like to thank the OAS and the Mexican government for the invitation and for allowing me to participate in this panel. So about the specific question, there is a huge risk, there is a huge abuse of Bitcoin and in linking it in a criminal activity in general, not only trafficking in firearms. So we've already seen this from software ransom, from cyber crime, and I mean any sort of crime actually. So it is a very important financing source for terrorism. So hence it is a special aspect that Cafilat is focusing on in the region. New obligations have been considered to take the companies that generate this type of virtual coins, and for those that manage funds, and for those to transfer this type of activities, to place them a level of a financial institution in terms of their obligations, legal obligations. It is very important to understand how the rule of the traveler has to be applied.
El dueño de una...
And know the information on who's the holder of a certain Bitcoin, so that the chain of payment and of holding can be kept. So it is important for the states to cover these new obligations. Mexico has already had a first experience in this regulation, and at Cafilat we are also trying to follow the Mexican standards so we can help countries to generate this. And there are activities, non-designed financial activities that it used to be believed that those were the activities that they did, and it is hard to fiscalize them, to audit them. However, we need to consider regulation of crypto coins for each of the countries. And of course, this is not an easy task. Now, specifically speaking, with illicit trafficking in firearms and how it is linked to other activities such as organized crime, what John was saying at the end, this is definitely an idea of the fact that it empowers criminal networks, providing, of course, the right means to keep on committing these crimes. So I think that there is a debt in terms of focusing on illicit trafficking in firearms. So there has to be a financial investigation simultaneously, trying to find the links with asset laundering so that they can also be taken into account. And it is important to mention that legal instruments are there. However, we need further training and guiding and prioritizing these topics in terms of the legal crime, on the legal activities against criminal activities. Thank you so much, Esteban, for your intervention. So I would like to now pass the floor for the final remarks, Mr. Jairo Guerrero from Colombia. Please go ahead. Thank you, Gaston. I would start by what has been said in the last couple of years. If we go back to the 90s or at the beginnings of the 2000s, where the investigation of OAS in asset laundry was quite mysterious and quite reduced, we have been growing efficiently, and I see smiling now. I think we've done great exercises from capabilities of investigation, prosecution, judges. I think that we are going to find whatever is missing, and I think that we are being efficient indirectly in source crimes and in result crimes. So we need to just further elaborate and develop the financial systems that we already have, because they already have capability, and we have to strengthen them with further capability building, with further information. So that's why I invite you to keep on working together, because this, of course, is going to have a positive result in these source crimes. And I think that these tools are flexible and have a multiple end or purpose. Now, regionally, I would like to thank all of the countries that participate with us, both in Orion operation, which is a naval interdiction, and where we have had great results in the prohibition of illegal drugs. And I think that there's also a great opportunity to keep on working in those corridors that definitely are used for firearms, for cash, for drugs, and also SUS operation, where we are also working very closely in Central America. I think that there are great opportunities there to keep on having these control exercise for those firearms. And last but not least, there's something that we have been quite worried about, the traumatic firearms or the traumatic weapons that we've seen, that even with some modifications can turn into a firearm, a full firearm. We've been working on an internal control of our arms, and this allows us to know where these arms are headed, what is their goal. So thank you so much, everyone. This has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Jairo, for your final remarks and for the question that's still pending. So now I would like to pass the floor to Ma'am Cindy Epps, please. Go ahead. The floor is all yours for any final remarks.
Thank you so much. I'll try to keep this short. I just wanted to say again, thank you for including control arms in this important conversation. I think by having this conversation in terms of both illicit arms trafficking, organized crime, money laundering, and a lot of different issues really demonstrates the need and the interest in cross collaboration across these fields. And I think this opportunity and this discussion has really highlighted that, and I think more of these are needed. The other thing I wanted to mention also, in addition to kind of cross collaboration with regard to different topics, there also is cross collaboration here between regional and international instruments, and that's something that Control Arms focuses quite a bit on. And we have published in the last couple of months a study called the ATT Regional Actor Study. And what that is the initial publication, which will then be followed by a larger, more substantial publication on what regional organizations are doing to support the Arms Trade Treaty and to support their regional instruments on arms control. And SIFTA is certainly one of the focuses that we have in this study. So I would encourage you to visit our website and to keep an eye open for more on the collaboration and the work that regional organizations and international instruments can do together to combat the illicit trafficking of arms. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and thanks for sharing all this information.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for sharing this information. So now, to conclude these preliminary interventions and the final remarks, I would like to pass the floor to Sean Grajales. Please. Thank you, Gaston. Well, about the Bitcoin, I think that Esteban mentions these risks. And there's also another important part of the region, not only use and abuse of Bitcoin, but also the use and abuse of all IT. And many times how difficult it is for investigators to provide a follow-up to information about this. So Bitcoin-wise, I think that, well, we have been invited in the region to look for mechanisms that allow to control or identify atypical movements and transactions in this framework. So I would like to celebrate the initiative that the Financial Analysis Unit had in Colombia in reporting all of the activities above $150 from April 1st. I think that this is a step forward to provide transparency in that business, not only to detect potentially related to organized crime activities, but also to provide transparency in crypto assets and Bitcoin. I think that creating this type of tools allows better knowing and providing follow-up on the activities potentially related to organized crime, and also to provide transparency to this market and to support this type of mechanisms. So on our behalf, we congratulate you for that type of initiatives, and we are here for you in whatever help that you may need. Thank you so much, Gaston. Thank you so much, Sean, for your intervention. I would like to thank once again each and every one of you for your interventions. And before we go back to Isaac Morales as a host member, I would proceed very quickly as a moderator to identify some topics that we discussed throughout this conversation, some strong, important ideas as a matter of conclusion and as a result for the next steps. So, the importance of the efforts by Mexico's and Colombia's governments to face this, and the important lessons that have been learned for the rest of to be shared for the rest of the governments in the comprehensive combat against illicit trafficking firearms, simultaneous with other criminal actions such as mitigation activities, and the role that the organizations, international organizations may play, not only we as OAS, but also GAFILAT, in supporting investigation on asset laundering, money laundering, and the regional efforts, and the importance of mutual legal assistance, but also the importance of regional networks for exchange of information, and support and guide the transnational investigations that facilitate international cooperation in real time. The key role that civil society organizations may play in order to aid governments, as it was shared today, to raise awareness, to provide academic activities that can be used to create new policies and that can also be used in implementing international conventions such as CIPTA. And to conclude, the support of technical assistance that we at the Department Against Transnational Organized Crime, OAS, can offer the state members, such as strengthening abilities and capabilities for financial actions related to illicit trafficking in firearms and the creation of types of money laundering related to illicit trafficking in firearms, and investigation that was mentioned before, like cover actions, like undercover actions and undercover exercises, including also establishing or promoting the informal information exchange networks, for example, the network of asset recovery at CAFILAT for investigations related to illicit trafficking in firearms. So this latter includes also ammunition and explosives, and it is clear with these amazing presentations that they affect the organized crime in their multiple modalities. So here we will be supporting the efforts of the state members of the OAS, along with the private sector and the civil society, to combat the security of the Americas. Having said this, I would like to thank once again the amazing panelists that we've had and their commitment and participating today with their contributions. In particular, I'd like to thank the Permanent Mexican Commission that as organizers and sponsors of this event have witnessed once again their collaboration spirit, and congratulations for offering this topic to further develop it. Also, last but not least, I would like to thank the audience for joining us, and I would also like to thank the efforts of our department at the OAS that, along with the Department of Public Security and our Ministry of Public Security, have done together. And I would like to thank the OAS press conference that have helped carry out this event. And I would like to pass now the floor back to Mr. Morales. Thank you so much, Gaston. And first of all, let me reiterate my appreciation for allowing me to moderate this important conversation, for you moderating this conversation. It has been a pleasure to have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs sharing this joint effort. So on behalf of the Mexican government, I would like to sincerely thank the Mexican mission before the OAS, Ambassador Madame Lucina Baños in particular, and the Department Against Transnational Organized Crime, the Representative Mr. Gaston, and the Department of Public Security of the OAS, and the Vice Minister Garcia Guerrero for his participation, Cindy, John, and Esteban. Thank you so much for your input, for your amazing input during this conversation, and each of the attendees that have joined us today from everywhere in the world. We have had definitely a conversation that shares beyond the narrative two elements that Mexico has put into practice and that has promoted in all mechanisms and multilateral fora that address this. First, a plural action with experts, government, players, civil society, and international bodies. All of the sectors have something to give, have something and have a responsibility facing this problem of illicit trafficking in firearms. And second, this is proof, this is evidence of the collaboration between different departments and ministries, CIFTA, GAFILAT, and all of the bodies that in some way have something to input. The call for synergies and cooperation is something that in multilateral Mexico will keep moving forward. And just allow me to share as a pro tempore presidency of the Committee of the Inter-American Commission of CIFTA, that Mexico's government will keep on working with three main goals in the next schedules of CIFTA. The first will be implementation. We have agreed important recommendations from CIFTA, and we have agreed important declarations and a roadmap that now it's important to implement, to instrument other national, regional, and international levels. Second, addressing the elements that in some way could be considered cross-sectional, the links between illicit markets with the rest of illicit markets, the firearms and the rest, and challenges of new technologies, as Jan just mentioned, the complete cycle, the full cycle of firearms, ammunitions, explosives, the human dimension, gender perspective, for example. And last but not least, the responsibility of all sectors before this problem. From producers, from industry, from the social civility organizations, from experts, from governments, we all have something to share, and especially we have a responsibility to undertake. And as it has been mentioned, that's where Mexico's effort rests, linked with the demand interposed in submitted against the US. And we are convinced
consultor jurídico de la Cancillería y el propio canciller Marcelo.
Along with Mr. Ebrard, we will move forward the roadmap that we all sectors have to commit to. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you once again. So with Mexico's intervention, we conclude our conversation. Have a great day, and we will remain in touch until our next activity as a department, as a ministry, as an organization.